The Florida Gators play football tonight, and we're going to talk about it with JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Gators your first listen every single day, and especially on game day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to either of our shows, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Also, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. My name is JT Wistrcill, host of Locked On Utes. Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators with me in what's going to be a fantastic crossover episode because it's so great to have football back. And I know for Utah, Brandon, the biggest question going into this game is still, as it's been forever since it happened in the Rose Bowl, will Cam Rising play or not? As of right now, when we're recording this on Wednesday, August 30th, I believe Cam is going to be out there. This is always so hard to predict and understand because Kyle Whittingham and just in general college football coaches, right, do such a great job of keeping these secrets and not letting you know. But I think Cam is going to play. He's worked really hard to get back. We know how much he wants to get back there. I think he's going to be healthy enough to go out there. I think to a great point you've made on your show, he's not going to be 100%, but I think he could be in that 85 to
BSer because it was like media days, and he's like, if Cam Rising isn't cleared 10 to 14 days before, he's not playing. And then like fall camp, it was like, we'll see how he is the week before the game. And a couple of days ago, I will not say a word about keeping Cam Rising. So I respect the way to just consistently gaslight everybody. I love that approach to things. But I also think Cam is going to play just because I've said it before. I don't care if Cam is 40%. If he's cleared, he's playing. Like he's an Iron Man. We all know that. So if Cam Rising can play, he's going to play. And I think that this is going to be one of those times where he's just like, shoot me up, Doc. I'm going in. So I think that we will see that. But my concern with that, at least on the Utah side of things, has always been against Florida specifically. Cam Rising's legs were a huge factor. I think it was 72 yards scrambling, 4 first downs with his legs alone. You're not going to do that. I don't care if you're 85 to 90%. Everybody that has torn their ACL and went on to play high level football has said it's not the physical part. You know, six months in, physically, we're usually good. It's 8 months to a year of the mental part of being like not worrying about that knee, not worrying about getting it injured again. And statistically, if you play a game less than 8 months or less than 9 months after tearing your ACL, it's rough. Quarterbacks, especially coming off torn ACL, I feel like they tend to not be as just hung-ho as they can be, and it tends to be a little bit of an issue there. So coming off 7.5 months at this point in time of a torn ACL and coming into play, I just don't see him being him. I think he'd be like, I think if Cam Rising plays, we're going to watch 2 quarterbacks that are not going to be running whatsoever with Cam and Graham Mertz. It's just going to be a battle of the statues over there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with Cam because he's, even when he got hurt last year, because he got nicked up during the USC game the first time around, we saw him come back against Arizona Stanford at home, and he just wasn't himself running the ball. He still ran it a couple times, like would scamper for a first down, but you could just tell like that's not the Cam Rising we're used to. It's not and we're definitely not seeing the version in the Rose Bowl that was still diving for first downs and just tried to power his way over. But it'll be interesting to see with Cam, and if he doesn't, we can talk about the backups in a second. But first, the Gators have their own kind of questions at quarterback. We know who it's going to be, but the question is, how is Graham Mertz going to perform in his first game as a Gator on the road in a hostile environment, Brandon?
Yeah, I will stick with my point until the day I die. My opinion, I'm very much the type where I watch the film, I get my opinion, and I'm like, okay, this is it, and it's not changing no matter what we hear about what they're doing in practice. For me, it's Graham Mertz is average. I think he's going to be better, or I'm sorry, I know he's going to be better with Florida than he was with Wisconsin, mostly because of just the scheme change. Scheme change, better weapons. He's going to be better than he was at Wisconsin. I don't know how good he's going to be. I think he's going to be average. And I am pretty confident in saying I don't think Graham Mertz is the kind of quarterback that can go out there and elevate the play around him like great quarterbacks do. That's why I've said that if Cam plays, he gives them the best chance of winning. I don't care if he's 40%, just because he would elevate the talent around him. I don't know how much Graham Mertz can elevate the talent around him. I don't know if he can ever go out there and win the football game for the Florida Gators. So that's where I'm like, I think Graham Mertz is average. And I think average is good enough to win some games this year with Florida. I think you play solid defense. You have two great running backs. You could do that. But I don't think Graham Mertz is just going to come out there throwing the football, winning the game for the Florida Gators. I think he can not lose the game. That'd be much appreciated, Graham. Put your best Alex Smith impression. Just give me that, and I'm happy.
And you make that point about Graham Mertz. It's a very similar reasoning for why I believe even if Cam does not play, Utah can still win with a Bryson Barnes or Nate Johnson, whoever it's going to be for the sake of right now. I still think it's going to be Bryson Barnes just when you factor in the experience, but we will see Nate Johnson at times just because of his athleticism being what it is. But I believe this Utah football roster is very talented. They're very good at home, as we know as well. And I do believe with Bryson Barnes, as a game manager type, just a cog in the systems. It's the same thing. Bryson Barnes will not be the reason Utah wins this game if he gets to start, but I believe Utah can establish the run in this game. And if they do, we saw Bryson last year against Washington State be able to dink and dunk a couple passes and make one or two plays down the field a little bit farther to help this team. And I do believe the Utah defense is going to step up as well. So you don't need a game like we saw Cam Rising against USC last year where he threw for 400 yards, is doing everything, him and Dalton putting the team on their back. That's not what I think Utah needs to win this game from Bryson, and why I think they can win with a backup quarterback because of how strong they've been at home.
Yeah, I think one of the things there where we talk about, both just needing game managers at this point, I will say I think Bryson might be able to game manage. But the point that I will always bring up is Florida's defense this year. Last year, the defense coverage-wise was fine. This year, it's going to be significantly improved because they're actually going to work on disguising coverages and messing with quarterbacks' minds. And I think that Bryson could fall to that one. And also that blitz plan, just the pass rush plan, really. Without Cam Rising, Bryson Barnes is going to be the guy that has to make sure everything is properly communicated. He is inexperienced. I know Utah fans like to come in my comments and go, he played 10 games. I don't care. If you played 200 snaps in your career and only 91 of them are you not handing the football off, you're inexperienced. Anthony Richardson had more snaps played prior to the 2022 season than Bryson Barnes has prior to the 2023 season. So I will say, yes, he's inexperienced just like Anthony Richardson was. And I think that you can make more mistakes that way. Graham Mertz might be a game manager, but at least he's got plenty of experience managing those games. And I'm curious to see how he steps up and operates here. I want to know, just completely irrelevant nerd tangent that I have to bring up here. I want to know how much of having Jim Leonhard as the Wisconsin defensive coordinator helped or hurt Graham Mertz, just like being able to identify exotic packages here. Because I know that he's going to face those against Utah. Utah is going to blitz him quite a bit, as they should, especially with the Florida Gators offensive line that is unproven at this, not even unproven, untested. We've never seen them come out together, and they've barely practiced together. So I'm curious to see that. I think Graham Mertz can manage the game better than Bryson Barnes. And I hate that we're both like, manage the game, because to me, it's just like, this is going to be the ugliest football game on the planet. Just run the damn ball and try not to have your quarterback screw it up for you.
It would be funny if I don't think this is what's going to happen, but ESPN, they're bringing in the A-team, Fowler and Herbie. If this was like a 10-7 like game, I don't see that happening. That'd be so funny. I'm sure Kirk Herbstreit would be like, I didn't know I didn't know I started with bad Thursday games already in his opinions. But I'm with you. I'm just excited to get football. It's going to be fun either way.
Yeah, I'm fully expecting to see what would look like Iowa versus Wisconsin last year. Just like it's just going to be ugly defense, run the ball, and hope that your quarterbacks don't screw it up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the strategy for both sides. Unless, like I said, the Cam factor is the one thing I still think he's going to play, but I feel like if there were odds on this, it would definitely be on Bryson Barnes just based on the reports we've heard. But it's going to be interesting to monitor, and it's just going to be interesting to dive into this matchup even further and talk about the keys for both Utah and Florida getting a season opening victory. We're going to talk about the keys for both sides' success in their first matchup of the season. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Getting a job post is super easy on LinkedIn Jobs. It's easy to create a profile, and then you can just add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's friendly. The LinkedIn Jobs is friendly for all businesses too, because they're rated #1 by small businesses in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. And another exciting thing we have going on here at the Locked On College Network, something Brandon knows a lot about, is college football season is here, and the college football kickoff live has arrived as well. Each Friday, Locked On will give you we'll go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel, and the college football kickoff live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth only like Locked On can provide, including insight and analysis from a stable of Locked On College hosts. Good chance that can include our two shows based on how tomorrow's game plays out, covering the teams and the variety of storylines that will play out across the college football landscape. So find Locked On College Football Kickoff live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. Brandon, you got any extra endorsement to add for that one?
I would just like to add for that one that you will see both of us with our post-games reactions. They're both going to be included in Friday at probably by 11:15, because that's when we're supposed to hit our first ad break, and we are both slated to have our post-game nows in there. So we're talking this game on Friday morning. Just saying.
One of us is going to be really happy and the other will be very dejected.
I will have tears regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
Tears of joy, tears of despair. I will be crying regardless.
Oh, and like you mentioned, this is going to be a game that's going to draw a lot of emotions as well. It's because the first game of the season, there's so much excitement around it. So when talking about the keys for a Gators win, what stands out for you?
For me, it has to be the run game, honestly, on both sides of the ball. Like, I think I posted the video right before we started recording. I tweeted out the video of every Montrell Johnson carry against the Utah Utes. And while I was making the video, I was getting pissed off because I was watching the game and it just kept being like 6 minutes of game time in between each carry for Montrell Johnson. I was like, he was really never given the opportunity to develop any kind of rhythm. And I think this year that's because there were plenty of yards that Montrell Johnson had. He had a fantastic football game.
Same for Etienne, right?
I'm sorry?
Etienne had a really good game too last year, right?
Yeah, Etienne had 5 carries for 65 yards.
Yeah, he averaged like 12 yards a carry, I think.
Yeah, it was a huge game that Etienne had also. He had that big run, of course, that was like 40 yards. He fumbled. It was his only fumble. Montrell Johnson's only fumble of the year, which is very weird to me. Montrell's was on his first carry. I think Trevor Etienne's was also on his first carry. And then they just cleaned it up after that. It was very weird. But I think for the run game, it's Montrell is finally going to get into a rhythm. Trevor Etienne will be allowed to get into a rhythm because, again, Trevor Etienne had 5 carries. Montrell had 12. Naquan Wright had 10 carries for under 40 yards. Like when he was on the field, it just sucked the life out of the offense. And that's not going to be the case. And I understand, Utah's defensive front, they're going to be improved. Utah's linebackers are going to be improved. They're tackling. They're not going to miss damn near 30 tackles in this game. But it is going to be interesting to see how they do rebound here because Montrell is a physical runner. I fully expect him to be the kind of guy that's like, hey, the first 6 carries, we're going to give it to Montrell and he's just going to start punching people in the mouth and we're going to see how that goes. But I'm curious to see how things wrap up because even with the offensive line being, I believe, worse for Florida than it was last year, I know they're going to be able to run block because that's their bread and butter. That's all they care about, really. They're like, hey, if you're an O-lineman and you want to come here, you better be physical in the run game. But it's also because of all the yards after contact that both of those guys picked up. I'm curious to see how they kind of react this year with Utah. I know Utah is going to be better at tackling, but how good are they going to be against two of the guys who were just, I think they're one of the most dynamic running back duos in the country.
This is a word I'm about to use that's gotten Florida fans riled up in the past. The position that scares me the most about Florida are the 2 running backs. It's Etienne and Johnson because of the performance they had last season. And, I think they're going to need to be even better. And I shouldn't say even better, just get more of an opportunity to show those talents because when I think of the Florida loss last year, I think of Anthony Richardson because he was the one who led Florida in rushing. He had the unbelievable plays in the game that helped the Gators eventually get the win in that one. So they're obviously going to turn to the running backs more because there's not Anthony Richardson there. And I do believe Anthony Richardson's skill set really gave Utah fits as well, considering how many times they still were able to apply pressure, get into the backfield, and then just not able to drag down Anthony Richardson because he was that good at shaking off tacklers as a big defender. So I think you make a great point about the run game on both sides of the ball. It's one I'm very similar with as well, because my goal really is, if I'm Utah, to to slow down the Gators rushing attack. I think Florida's going to have a good game on the ground. I do not think they'll rush for 298 yards like they had last year, but I do think there's a good chance they could get over 150 to even over 200 because it's the style they want to play. They have good run blocking offensive line, to your point, and we know that they have the backs as well who are going to make some Utes miss tackles. Utah is not going to go from 29 to 0 missed tackles in this game. Now, that number should be under 15 if you're Utah. You're playing at home, a lot more experience on this defense. That number should be under 15. And I'm sure the coaches have even said they probably want it under 5 or 10. Well, understanding if it's a little bit more than that just because of the physicality. But if I'm Utah, the goal is definitely to get Florida in 3rd and long as much as I can. So then you can really unlock your blitz package because, Brandon, and it's the point you've made as well, it's a new offensive line up front. So with the exotic blitzes that Morgan Scalley does a great job drawing up, I think Utah will have a chance to get home. And unlike last year, when they get home, they're going to be able to take Graham Mertz down. And going to the other side of the ball too for Utah, if Utah can establish the run and get in 3rd and short situations, I think that opens the offense up more. So easier passes for Bryson Barnes. Doesn't have to drop back as long because as of right now, Utah's going to have a freshman left tackle starting. He's a 4-star. He's supposed to be a good player. Florida has a guy who with NFL potential that if I'm the Gators, I'm lining up across from him all game long and any 3rd and long and have him pin his ears back and just rush the quarterback. So I really do feel like it feels to me at least like whatever team has more yards on the ground, especially if Cam Rising doesn't play, is going to win this game.
Yeah, this is it, like we've been saying, this is going to be just punch you in the mouth football. Yeah. I can't wait to see Princely line up against the left tackle just because what I've seen from Princely Umanmielen as a pass rusher last year against Utah, he became a completely different player at like the midway point of the season. He became the truly elite pass rusher that he can become. He showed flashes of that. Texas A&M, he had dominant performances. The spin move came out of nowhere. I was rewatching his game against Utah last year. He did so little as far as trying to deconstruct blocks and break them off. And then towards the end of the year, it was like, he's all of a sudden has a great spin move. I know he's been working on the pass rush repertoire this whole offseason. He's been working with specialists to develop a pass rush repertoire and actually have different tools in his toolbox there. So I'm curious to see how he breaks out. But I think with Florida's, I'm pretty confident in Florida's defense this year. And I know that a ton of guys are not proven. I'm pretty confident that schematically they're a great fit this year. I don't think they were a great fit last year. I think you've got a great fit schematically this year, a much more aggressive defensive coordinator that's going to also dial up his own little blitzes and his pass rush packages. So for me, I think a lot of it falls on the shoulders of Florida's offense, especially because when we look at what Utah does defensively, Morgan Scalley, when he's not blitzing, he plays a lot of cover 1, which is also part of his blitzes, and he plays a lot of cover 2. Both of those are kind of pointing to Florida might have a difficult time throwing the football also because cover 2, you got 2 defenders deep, you've got 5 underneath. Florida wants to throw the ball short. That could be a little bit of an issue with 5 defenders working underneath. So I think with Florida, it's when you do get the opportunity to complete those short passes, your playmakers need to be dynamic. Florida's playmakers last year were not. Justin Shorter, great X receiver, not a dynamic playmaker after the catch. Xavier Henderson, fast. That's it. Sorry, tall and fast, and that's it. And that's all we have there. So you've got more dynamic playmakers this year. If you're Florida, it's about actually them making those plays. I know we hype the freshman all we can. Aiden Mizell's fast as hell. I don't know how much he's going to play. Andy Jean is a pretty good route runner. I don't know how much he's going to play. Eugene Wilson III, very dynamic with the ball in his hands. I don't know how much he's going to play. So for me with Florida, it's like you're going to want to complete these underneath passes, and they're going to be difficult because you're going to see cover 1 press and you're going to see cover 2, and there's going to be Utah defenders in that area. I think Ricky Pearsall has a great game. I've said before, I think Ricky goes over 100. Like watching the film from last year, there were a lot of times where he was open and he's like waving his hands, and Anthony Richardson is like, and just chooses to not do it. So I'm curious to see how that works out this year because Ricky's back. He's going to be in the NFL next year. I'm not even going to pretend that he's not going to be. I think skill set wise, he's got it. So I'm curious to see how much they kind of force feed him the ball in the passing game while also trying to, because you got to keep Utah's defense honest. You can't just let them key in on the run the entire game.
Yeah, I really think another key for Utah's defense too, and we've touched on a little bit already, but Utah was in position to make plays last year and just wasn't able to, whether it was tackling and look, like you said, in coverage. I think they might be tested a little bit more this year just because of Richardson isn't as strong of a thrower, just strictly throwing the ball, at least of what we expect Graham Mertz to be in this one, even though we know Richardson was capable of making those wow plays. With Mertz, he's more, like you said, he's just going to execute the shorter throw at a higher level than Richardson did. And Utah has experienced defensive backs, guys who have been in the system for a while. You get a guy in JT Broughton who last year spent the entire offseason rehabbing. This year, he's just spent it training. Zamiah Vaughn, another year under his belt. And then the other guys, that's why I feel good about the two guys Utah got. And then you just need one more guy to step up, right? A Miles Battle with a lot of experience coming over from Ole Miss starting. A Teo Johnson, who's a receiver convert to corner, who earned the job. He makes me a little more nervous just in his first game.
He should.
If he earned the job, I would have trusted him a little bit. And also Smith Stone, the true freshman, who I do think has a lot of potential to perform well. Just as you were talking about, you expect some of these young Gators will have a chance to shine in their first game just of the season and at Salt Lake as well, with the altitude aspect of this as well. And that's probably something we should touch on in a moment when we are going to dive into the altitude aspect, as well as give a couple of predictions about this contest in 1 second. Brandon, I don't think it's been as out of control this year as it was last year in terms of just all the hype surrounding the humidity. The altitude talk seems to be more in check this year, but I do think it's going to have an effect on this game. How do you see the Gators being able to handle playing in the Salt Lake altitude?
I think that Florida, obviously it's going to impact the game. I'm not an idiot. I understand this. Last year, I said the humidity was going to be a factor.
I did say it would impact it, but I will admit I underestimated a little bit too. And I realized that quickly once I saw Utah guys cramp it up and even throw it off.
Yeah. It got rough real quick. That was like the more you around, the more you're going to find out really quick with the humidity. I think that Florida is going to be affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to be as affected by it as Utah was with the humidity, not because of, better athletes. I'm not even saying that. I just think humidity really kills you. Like, I live in a humid area, and when it's really humid, even I'm like, damn, like it gets rough really quick. So I think humidity is going to play, or humidity played more of a factor than altitude will this year. But I still think altitude's going to play a factor. I've said I think Florida needs to start hot, because I think when we get late into the game, that's when you're really going to feel it. I think Florida, you need to have a strong first half, because I think Utah wins the second half. So I think Florida needs to have a strong first half. I will say I think the new clock rules also play in Florida's favor a little bit, just because of that elevation that works against Florida. But with Florida, with the new clock rules, you get the first down, you can, clock keeps running, and you can kind of shorten this game, which is what I think Florida needs to do. And so I think the clock rules help Florida. Elevation obviously hurts Florida, but I think Florida wins this game. And I've said this always. You can easily tell me, hey, Utah's going to win. And I'm like, I buy it. It's going to be a close game. Utah's a good football team. I told you off air. We did our Locked On Top 25 a week or two ago. I had Utah 10th or 11th in ranks. I think they're a good football team. I just think this is one of the games where Florida's going to win, especially with Utah's quarterback situation. Florida at least knows what they're getting in Graham Mertz. We might not as fans and media, but Florida knows what they're getting in Graham Mertz. They know how things operate. They know how to get the most out of him. So I think Florida wins this game. I think it's very close. And even on Locked On Pac-12, I said 21-17. It's going to be low scoring. It's going to be very close. I think Florida wins a very, very close game.
I like it. Now actually, what you were talking about there ties back into a point you made earlier as well about Florida wanting to run the ball. If Florida can run the ball and keep their defense fresh and not constantly have the Gators defense on the field, they're not as likely to get worn down in the second half. I agree with you that Utah should win the second half just because of the altitude and also just my feelings about this Utah team in general. They've always seemed to improve over the course of the game in general. They, especially last year, they were a team that started hot always. There were a lot of drives they would not score a touchdown, and then they would be like, wait, why are we tied with Stanford at the end of the first quarter? And then you blink and you're like, oh, hey, it's 30-7 or something like that. And that is not what this game is going to be against the Gators. Utah held opponents last year at home to 16 points per game. I believe the Gators are going to score more than that. I do think this is a good Florida team. But it's a very new Florida team as well, playing in a new environment, new quarterback. There's just lots of new aspects to it. New defensive coordinator. I know he's someone you're very high on as well, but still his first game and going against a little bit of an unpredictable Utah team just because of the quarterback situation. But I'm sure he'll have them prepared in a lot of those regards. But because of how stout this Utah team is at home, because of also the fact that they lost last year. I know, especially if Cam Rising plays, I know that had to have eaten away at them. And that extra motivation factor, I think, is going to play a role for this Utah team being at home in front of their crowd that is going to be rowdy. I know it's not as loud as some of the SEC crowds, but it's going to be, it's going to be still loud for an offensive line, especially that's working together for the first time. And just in general, when you get tired in that situation, it kind of everything just kind of adds up and builds up overall. So I do think this Utah team's going to win, even if Cam doesn't play. I like Utah, and I'll just predict. I said Cam's going to play, so I'm going to predict it with Cam playing. I think Utah wins this one 33-23. I think this is a close game at halftime, and I think it's really in the fourth quarter where we see that separation. This, to me, will play out like more a 6 to kind of 7, like a 1 touchdown game, and I think Utah will get a late field goal to kind of give them that extra cushion and comfort to help them get the win. But Brandon, you got any other bold predictions before we get out of here?
I would just like to say, yeah, Utah was great, especially that last drive last year. That ended so well for them. I'm going to bring this point up here because I know your listeners are going to hear this, and I want them to hear this.
Do you want to get back in their bad graces after you just said you had Utah at 10, by the way? In your preseason?
No, I'm just talking about this part because I keep getting the comment of Cam Rising through the uncharacteristic interception. And we talked about this yesterday, where it's like Cam Rising through the uncharacteristic interception. That's why like they should have had a touchdown there. Maybe, but Montrell Johnson had his only fumble of the season on the first play, and Utah then scored a touchdown off of it. So I don't care about Cam's uncharacteristic turnover because Florida had one as well. And I don't care that Cam's uncharacteristic turnover cost them a touchdown because Florida had that same situation there. So you're net 0 in the turnover differential, 0 in uncharacteristic turnover differential, 0 in those points suffered because of it. So I will say I don't care about Cam Rising's pick at the end of the game. I don't care about anything else. I will say, and I said it yesterday on Locked On Pac-12, Utah, me-ta, him-ta, her-ta, I don't care who it is. Florida's winning this game. In my opinion, Florida's winning this game against a very good Utah team. It's just a game where I'm just seeing blue in the sea for some reason.
To close this one out, I will say I do think Jaquindon Jackson's in for a good game. I think he's going to start the season off with 100 yards on the ground. I think the Utah offensive line will have a good game. I think if Cam starts, he's going to throw for, I'll go 2 touchdown passes. I could see it being 3 as well. If Bryson's in there or Nate, I still see them getting 1 in this contest. And I think Utah is going to force at least 1, could be 2 interceptions on Graham Mertz. And I'll throw in, I do think they get home at least 3 times.
Yeah, I would honestly, if Florida drops back 25 times, they're probably getting home 3 to 5 times.
3 to 5?
I think 3. They're going to be aggressive. Like we've talked about, Florida offensive line hasn't played together. Graham Mertz hasn't played with this offensive line, so blitz pickup might be a bit of an issue there. So I think that they can get home, but it's about Florida just make it 3rd and short. Just same thing for both sides. Make it 3rd and short and try to convert those and try to just kill the clock. That's all it is. And it's going to be fun. I will say we've had a lot of fun talking trash. I will continue to talk trash to Utah fans until the day I die at this point. I'm going to let that one be clear. But I'm just looking for a good football game, and I'm glad the college football's back.
Yeah, we appreciate all of you Locked On Utes and Locked On Gators fans who have supported our shows throughout this entire offseason process and just the lead.
Or not supported.
Or not supported.
Or not supported.
You've joined just to talk crap, basically. It's the same thing. We still enjoyed. We had fun, and it is so exciting that game day is officially here for both these teams. The time for talk is over, and it's time to get it underway now. So for Brandon Olsen, I'm JT Wistrcill. Thank you all for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Gators your first listen every day, and we'll be back with you tomorrow on both of our shows reacting to how the first matchup played out. We'll see you then.